There are a few different ways that we can obtain pricing for each individual component. The first, and our go-to, is by using an online construction database called RSMeans. Another way is by using blended rates from past projects that we've worked on. We can also determine pricing by using information provided to us by the property manager, a board member, or a maintenance or super for the building or community that we are updating the study for. There are three main funding plans: full funding, threshold funding, and baseline funding. I'll explain each of the different funding plans, starting with the most conservative, full funding. Full funding assumes that every item within the reserve study will accumulate the full value of its replacement cost over the course of its useful life. The reason this is the most conservative is because it leaves a very large cushion in the reserve fund that the value never drops below. The funding plan that has the most risk is baseline funding. Baseline funding lets the reserve fund drop to zero in its lowest year. The reason this plan comes with the most risk is because a reserve study is not an exact science, and letting the reserve fund drop to zero in any given year doesn't leave any room for unforeseen expenses. The third option is threshold funding. Threshold funding basically gives an association the ability to say that while they don't want to be as conservative as full funding, they don't want to take on as much risk as comes with baseline funding, they would like something in the middle. Either a dollar amount or a percentage is designated as the threshold, preventing the reserves from dropping below that number. In our reserve studies, we like to show associations a graphical representation of these three funding plan options as well as current funding. Current funding shows on the graph what the next 30 years would look like should the association continue to fund the reserves the way that it is now. This allows an association to see a glimpse into the future, so to speak. They're able to see whether their current funding plan matches closely to full funding, baseline funding, somewhere in the middle, or maybe it even drops below zero at some point.